All right, Dr. in the Dungeon, welcome back. We're going to continue on today with the DraftSight tutorial number 2. And so I'm going to cover a few of the same concepts that I talked about yesterday, but in a little more detail. We're going to talk about some more commands that will help you. We'll talk about the mirror, the fillet, the array, offset. We're going to talk about text in a little bit more detail. And then we'll talk about grouping and ungrouping and how you can utilize that. And then the last thing that we'll talk about is the layer manager and how you can utilize that. So here we are, we finished up with this drawing yesterday. And so I'm going to jump right in and I'm going to use the mirror command. So again, remember that our mouse wheel allows us to zoom in and out. If I push down on the mouse wheel, I can shift my drawing around. All right. So I'm going to select that, I'm going to type the mirror command, and then it's going to ask for a specify start point. And so I'll just pick a place, and then I'll run that line, and once I left click, it disappears, and you're like, what? What happened to it? Where'd it go? All right, it didn't disappear, but what it is asking you is, hey, do you want to delete the source entity? And there are reasons why you might or might not want to do that. So I do a lot of plaques for our department. And I like to do the engraving on the back side of the plaque so that the front side is nice and smooth. And so in order to do that, I'll use that mirror command, and that reverses everything. And so it will print backwards. And so when you're looking at it from the front, it's correct. So in this case, I'm going to say, no, I don't want to delete the source entity. And there it is. Okay. So let's undo that, and we'll do the same thing from the side. And you'll notice that I do have ortho on. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to delete the source entity. I'm going to press yes. And so it deleted the source entity and left this. All right. Now I will say, if you're doing plaques and you're going to be coming back later and doing different versions of that plaque, like updating yearly stuff. Save early, save often, and save the plaque in a couple different states. All right, so we'll talk about the text command here in a little bit in some great detail, and when we do that, I'll talk about great places to save. All right, so in this instance, before I flip it, all right, I might actually just save that. And the reason that I would do that is that it just saves me a couple of steps later on if I have to come back in and change something. So if I have the original layout and it's unmirrored, it's just easier to manipulate and work with. All right, so typically if I'm doing a drawing that I'm going to be laser cutting, it's not uncommon for me to save 3 or 4 different times so that I can come back anywhere along there and pick up where I left off without creating a bunch of extra work moving stuff back to where it should have been. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll undo that. First, let's talk about the fillet command. The fillet command is very handy. I'm going to go ahead and do a rectangle. This drag and drop, doesn't really matter what it is. Now, again, like I said yesterday, the way that I learned is I do command line input, and so that's how I do things most of the time. Very rare that I use the GUI, the graphic user interface, and in some cases I don't even know specifically where that particular command is located. I have to look for it, and so it is what it is. All right, so that fillet command is one of those. I'm not really sure where the heck it's at on here because I don't ever use the GUI for it. So I'm going to select this and I'm going to type fillet. Now, down here at the bottom, it's going to tell me, okay, the radius is 0.25, which is actually what I'm looking for. Most times it's defaulted to 0.0. And so if I try to radius at 0.0, it just makes a 90-degree angle. And so that's not helpful. That's not actually a fillet. So 0.25, then I have some different options here. So typically So if I wanted to change the radius, I could type R, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to type R, and we'll make it 0.125. I don't know. So now we see my specify radius is 0.125. Now I want to do multiple, so I'm going to type the M and enter, and then it says specify first entity. And I'm just going to click, and I'm just going to keep going until I get everything filleted that I wanted to fillet. There it goes. All right, and when I'm done, hit escape. One of the things that happens a lot with DraftSight is that sometimes you might be 2 or 3 levels deep inside a command, and so you may have to escape multiple times to get out of that. And I've just kind of gotten in the habit of hitting escape 2 to 3 times when I go to escape something, and that makes sure that I'm backed all the way out of a command structure. Okay, so that was helpful. Now let's talk about the offset command. So the offset command is located here, and so we're going to slip that, and then we're going to do offset. And so the first thing it's going to do is say specify the distance. Right now the default is set at 0.1. I want to set it at 0.25, quarter inch. Press enter. All right, specify side, and so I want to put that offset on the outside, and so I just click out there, and bam, it throws it up. All right, so here's again, I'm still in that command interface, and so I'm going to hit escape a couple times so that I get out of it, and I can do what I want to do. All right, and so just to verify, I'm going to go up here to dimensions, and I'm going to select linear dimension, and then just click there, and you can see that it did indeed put an offset line at 0.25 inches. And just escape and lose that. Let's talk about text. So the text is right here underneath the home tab, and I'm going to click text, and I'm just going to drag it and drop it more or less center here. All right, and now it brings up this little menu bar, and it should look very familiar. It's very similar to Microsoft Word. Some design tips that I use is that I'm just going to go ahead and type whatever it is that I want to type before I do anything. All right, so there it is. Now I'm just going to select everything that I've typed, and I can change it as we want. Then we'll go with Cambria. I don't know, whatever. And I want it bigger, so let's go 0.5. Nice, I like it. Let's center justify that. I like that. Yeah, good. I can bold it, I can italicize it, underline it. I can do whatever I want to do. And then when I'm done, if I just click outside of that, there it is. All right. So now this is all one entity. So I click on it, and you can see that it's got the whole thing. So I can move that wherever I want to. If I've got ortho on, it will only move in 90-degree increments, which is sometimes helpful because I had this more or less centered, right? So I can just drop it there. A lot of times when you do your spacing within the text command, once you exit the text command, it may change a little bit, and so don't worry about it. Just go ahead and get basically what you want, and then you can manipulate that stuff later. All right, so here we go. We've got .d in a dungeon, and you notice that it created everything that we've done so far on the construction layer. It's white, and the laser cutter just doesn't pay any attention to that. So if I sent this to the cutter, it wouldn't even see any of this. Now I can change my active layer by going over here, and we're going to click engrave. All right. Now anything that I can create now is on the engraved layer. So there I did another rectangle, and that's on the engraved layer. And you can toggle stuff back and forth. So if I just clicked on that, and I can come over here, and it'll go ahead and flip it to the engraved layer. Now again, you see that it's all one entity. All right, so we're going to talk about some grouping commands, some ungrouping commands. to include explode and text explode. All right. So let's talk first about, I'm going to go ahead and exit that. So I created this as a rectangle, and even though I did a fillet operation on it, it's one entity. So when I click on it, it's just one entity. All right. So I can use the explode command, and it will separate that down into different. So there's an arc, there's a line. All right. There's a line. Okay, so I can do a lot of different things for that. All right, so the explode command is very handy. I can also do the same thing for this text, only I can't use the explode command. I have to use an explode command that is specific for text, and that is the explode text command. So I've got it selected, and you can see the blue dots there, and I'm just going to type explode, no space, and text, and then it breaks it all down into the individual line segments. All right. And so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this line here. Oops, maybe I am. Okay, so see what's happening is that I was still in that command structure, so that's why it was not working for me. All right, so now each of these is their own separate thing. We talked about the hatch command the other day. All right, so again, my active layer is engraved, so anything that I do is going to be on that layer. So I'm going to select hatch, the pattern's net 3, the scale is 0.25. I already specified the entities, so I'm just going to click it and it's going to already say, yep, okay, we're good. And I hit OK. And so now it's got this net pattern, this hatch pattern, that the laser cutter will cut. So, and again, you notice that that's all one entity. So I select that and I can delete it. Now, one of the hazards that can happen with the hatch command is that if you have a profile that's not completely closed, the hatching can escape. All right. So we use the text explode to break this down, but we see that each of the exterior and interior profiles is its own little entity. So I'm going to use the command explode. I'm going to select that and I'll use explode. And now it's going to break it down into different little line segments. All right, and I'm going to break out a couple of these line segments. All right. So here is one of the things that can typically occur when we use this hatch command. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do everything that I've already done, and then I'm going to hit OK. And then you see how the hatch escaped through this hole? All right, and sometimes it's really, really bad. This actually isn't terrible. All right. So I can edit that, but first, again, when I click on this hatching, it's all one entity. So I have to select it, and I'm going to explode it again. And now everything is its own little entity. And so easiest thing for me to do now is I'm just going to do a line, and I'm going to select that endpoint, and I'm going to go to that endpoint, escape. All right. And now I can edit this by using the trim command, and that's TRIM. All right, and it's going to ask for the cutting edge, and I'm going to use that as the cutting edge, and press enter, and then it's going to say specify the things that you want to cut. Well, I'm going to cut those. All right, now did you see what happened here to this line right here? All right, it completely deleted it because I didn't have this set as a cut edge. So let's undo that and let's do it again. All right, so we're going to use that trim command again. Specify the cutting edges. I'm going to use that, and I'm going to use that. Press enter, and now I'm going to select. Oh, and no, let's. So I should have done it over here too because it's going to delete that whole line, right? So trim. All right, specify the cutting edges. So anywhere that those lines are going to cross, I need to specify that, otherwise it'll delete that whole line. Okay, so those are the cutting edges that I need. I press enter, and then it's going to say pick the segments that you want to delete. Okay, so they're gone. And then I hit escape to clear out of that, and there we go. Problem fixed. All right, so let's delete this out. Let's talk about grouping. So let's say that this is an integral part that I'm going to insert into another drawing. And so I might be moving that around, shifting it around to get the orientation exactly right. And so what we typically do, is we just select everything and we'll type move, right? That's what we do. But if, for instance, I did that and for whatever reason I missed a part of it, and I type move. All right, so I get it over here, and then, oh, shoot. Well, in this case, it's not that big a deal because I already have center line and I can just move it back. However, I'm not always going to have that. Sometimes, it took a lot of planning and layout to get the geometry exactly what I wanted, and so it could be very painstaking to return that. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that whole thing and I'm going to quick group it. And now if I just click on it, that whole thing is one entity. All right, so I can drag it, drop it, move it, and it moves everything, and the spatial relation stays the same within that whole thing. And then the quick ungroup undoes all that. Right? So very, very handy stuff. Let's talk about the layer manager, be the final thing I talk about today. So the layer manager, I can actually access the layers in 3 different places. So this is version 2016, which I'm using due to conflicts with the laser driver, the laser cutter driver. On my other computer, I'm on 19. And on 2018 and 19, this little bar is over on this side. All right, but other than that, you really wouldn't know the difference. So I can set my active layer over here by just, picking whatever it is that I want it to be. All right, and so when I set my active layer, whatever I do after I set that active layer, it's going to be on that layer. I can change the line attributes right here. And I will do that on occasion, but I generally ask students not to do that. I don't want them changing line attributes because it creates problem for me when it comes time to cut, because I have to try to second guess what it is exactly that they want to do. All right, I can do the same thing. I can select my active layer here, all right, from this little drop down. And then the layer manager actually gives me the capability of making a lot of adjustments to the actual layers. And I can see all the layers at one time, and I can make changes to those. So here on the left gives me the name of my different layers. And then we have the show bar, whether that layer is actually going to be displayed or not. So there I just clicked on panel and turned it off and hit OK. And the panel layer are these green lines that show the cutting area of my laser cutter. And so click that and they're gone. All right, so I can just go back up into Layer Manager. I can turn Show back on, click OK, and they're back. All right. So this is really helpful if I have a very complex drawing and I want to, say, make some unilateral changes to line types or whatever. I mean, there's 100 different reasons why I might want to turn a layer on or off. So if I turn a layer off, I can select everything around that, and that layer that's turned off is not in that selection. And so I can, it becomes very handy, especially on very complex drawings that have a lot of detail. Let's go back to our Layer Manager. The lock button. So the panel I have set to lock, everything else is open. And the reason that I have it locked is that I can select those but I can't do anything to them without unlocking it. And so if I try to delete that, it just ignores the command because, and it says it was on a locked layer. All right, line color, self-explanatory. If you create a new line type, if you were, so maybe I want to have some different levels of engraving. I want thicker lines for one portion of it. Whatever. I mean, I can think of a lot of different reasons why I might want to do that. I would keep the color the same, but I might change the line type, or I might do a slightly different variant of green so that I can see that, oh, okay, that's different than the others. All right. All this is gives you visual reference for what it is that you're trying to do. So you can look at the drawing and you can get a basic idea of what you're trying to do. Same thing with the line style, dashed line, continuous lines, and there's a whole lot of different selections within that dashed line thing. So that's all helpful. Line weight, this is really important. So if I'm going to vector cut something, I want to cut all the way through the material, I have to have the line width at 0 millimeters. Up to 20, it will still cut through, but it's not as effective. Anything that's over 20, even though it might be on the vector cut layer, if the line width is greater than 0.2, the laser cutter will see it as an engrave rather than a vector cut. And then so on the engrave, it's set with the default of 0.4 millimeters. If you change that, and again, that ratio, or it has to be 0.4 or greater to engrave. And so if I doubled that to 0.8, then the line would be roughly twice as thick when it actually engraves. So you have a lot of flexibility in what you do here. And the last thing that we'll talk about here is we have print turned on and off for a lot of these. So panel layer is turned off for printing, construction layer is turned off for printing, and then the def points layer, which is essentially another construction layer, is turned off, so that when you send this to print, the laser cutter doesn't even recognize those. Okay, I hope this has been helpful to you. Thanks again. Dr. Ian and Dungeon out.